You want to know the real me? Then come to my house. In high school, she was the beauty of our class, and with her honest eyes, she looked straight at me and whispered that. At our recent class reunion, she was the same as ever, hiding her face with her overgrown hair, but her beautiful eyes hadn't changed a bit. I was drawn into her beautiful eyes, silently nodding yes. I got on the train with her. In the quiet train car, only the sound of my heart beating echoed. I'm Daniel Miller, a 40-year-old single office worker. After graduating from college, I've been all about work, striving for promotions and working hard towards a stable life, aiming for management positions. Before I knew it, I was 40, and I had no girlfriend. The last time I was in love was in high school. Thanks to my friends who confessed on my behalf, I was able to date her. But our relationship never really progressed, and we broke up after just 3 months. With little romantic experience, now I'm 40 and still single. My colleague Matthew looks at me and says, I'll introduce you to someone nice, let's go out for drinks next time, and my mother has started recommending matchmaking to me. I've begun to feel pressured about marriage as more and more people around me suggest it. On my days off, I searched the internet for matchmaking services and thought about trying a free consultation. But is there really a young woman who would choose a 40-year-old like me? With that thought, I just can't seem to take any positive action. Then one day, I received an invitation to a high school reunion. Excited to see old friends and hoping for a good match with fellow single classmates, I decided to attend the reunion. Then, the day of the reunion arrived in a flash. It was a letdown, as all the classmates who attended were already married. Our child finally made it to middle school, so I've recently switched from part-time to full-time. My kid's in 5th grade now, and more children around us are taking lessons. They're going to cram school and piano lessons, so we're cutting back and saving money. My classmates were busy talking about their children's latest news. I couldn't keep up with the conversation and ate my meal alone, feeling out of place. Then, a little late, a woman entered the pub where the reunion was held. With her face hidden by her long hair, she sneaked into a corner of the venue with an attitude that said, "Don't look at me." Her suspicious, almost thief-like gestures drew everyone's attention. What's up with her? Was she in our high school class? Some whispered, while others stood up saying, I'm curious, I'll go talk to her. Then, approached by curious classmates, she peeked out from her long hair, looking frightened. Hey, isn't that Lily Martinez? A classmate who had been watching from afar spoke up. Lily was the class beauty when she transferred to our school in 10th grade. She was half Spanish and Eritrean, with beautiful olive skin and brown eyes. Good at both studies and sports. She was approached by several boys who all ended up getting turned down. Her beautiful olive skin and brown eyes were just as striking as before, peeping out from her long hair. But she seemed like a completely different person, with everything about her appearance and personality changed in a negative way. The once friendly and well-liked girl, who spoke to everyone, was nowhere to be seen. She seemed incredibly scared, unable to make eye contact with anyone. She was utterly isolated from the space where old friends were enjoying themselves. Her hair was overgrown, tangled in places, and mixed with gray, a far cry from her glamorous image back then. Some classmates courageously asked her, "What happened? What's going on?" But she remained silent and looked down, no matter who spoke to her. Awkwardness won over, and the classmates began to avoid her as the reunion continued. The women were getting excited talking about their husbands and children's antics. The men were drinking and reminiscing about the old days. It was as if she was just huddled alone in the corner of the room, unseen by anyone's eyes. Why did she come here in the first place? What happened to her after she graduated from high school? Questions about her kept popping into my mind, and all I could see were her eyes. I was terribly worried about her. The reunion came to an end, and everyone started preparing for the after party. Let's go for karaoke for the after party. What? We're not kids anymore. The after party should be at a bar. You're still going to drink. Enough with the booze already. What? We can drink at karaoke, right? Amidst the chatter of classmates about the after party, she was quietly leaving. Naturally drawn to follow her, I'm stopped by a classmate asking, "Which do you prefer, bar or karaoke?" I replied, "Sorry, I have a meeting early tomorrow for work, so I have to go home early," and pursued her. She was headed to the station with light steps, slipping through the crowd. I chased her hard, but was out of breath, feeling as though everything was going dark in front of me. Am I out of shape because I only do desk work, or is it my age? I thought about various things as I finally caught up with her. Catching my breath on the platform, I nervously approached her. "Lily, do you remember me? I'm Daniel. We were together in our sophomore year in high school," but she remained silent. "Is your home in this direction? I'm going that way too. Let's go back together." I desperately talked to her, who didn't say a word. Maybe I should give up if she doesn't respond. But I just couldn't leave her alone. If I give up talking to her now, she might just vanish somewhere far away. And in some unknown city, she might quietly disappear without catching anyone's eye. It might be an exaggeration, but that's the concern I felt when looking at her back. She remained silent even as I kept talking to her. However, as if she had been defeated by my persistence, her brown eyes peeked out from her long hair. "You really want to know the real me? Then come to my house." She stared at me with her straight eyes, whispering so. I was drawn into her beautiful eyes and silently nodded yes. A train arrived at the station, cutting through the tense air. I boarded the train with her, and only the sound of my heartbeat echoed in the quiet car. I was indeed worried about her, but to be suddenly invited to her home. Sweat flowed down my forehead, and my hands trembled with tension. The train quickly arrived at her nearest station, and I followed her without a word. She led me to a one-room apartment that seemed to be quite old, possibly 40 or 50 years old. Once we reached her home, my nervousness turned into hesitation. "It's rude to barge in suddenly, so let's talk here," I said to her, and instead of entering, we stood talking in the dimly lit entrance of the apartment. "Why did you talk to me like this?" she asked with a cold voice, and I replied gently. "I was curious. You seem to have difficulty talking to people, so why did you come to the reunion?" Then she began to tell me, in a slow and careful voice, why she came to the reunion and about her past. I really didn't want to go to the reunion, but my mom told me to go and say hello to my high school teacher. Saying so, she shed tears of frustration. "Why your mom? Was there a connection with the teacher?" I dug deeper into her story without any hesitation. She answered my question seriously. "My mom is a Spanish, and she came to America when she was in high school. She didn't understand English, and the then new teacher taught her English after school. My high school teacher was a veteran English teacher who was about to retire at the time. The teacher is now 80 years old at the time when we turned 40. I can see the image of a teacher who, though elderly, was happily reuniting with former students at the recent class reunion. The teacher had also been the mentor of her mother, Jessica, so she was told, 'You must go to the reunion and greet the teacher,' and forced her to drive there, which she did not want to do. It's pathetic, isn't it, that I can't even go to the reunion on my own without being dragged by my mom." Saying this, she suddenly turned the collar of her blouse, tears streaming down her face as she blushed in shame. I was taken aback by her sudden action. But what caught my eye was shocking. Spreading from her collarbone down were the painful scars of burns. The itchiness or scratches and red spots were clearly visible, even in the dark entrance. "What happened? These scars?" I asked in confusion, and she responded with a dark face. "In my 20s, my ex-boyfriend who I was living with cheated on me. That night, we fought because of it, and he angrily poured boiling water from a kettle on me while I was asleep." I was speechless, frozen, and she broke down in tears and screamed. "I've been so depressed about these scars, I can't do anything. I quit my job, and I'm barely getting by on money from my parents. Relatives and friends who see me say, I don't know what to say to you. I hate this life." When she screamed like that, I suddenly recalled the scene at the reunion. All of our classmates didn't know how to deal with her and ultimately ignored her. No one thought about how much of an insult this attitude was to her. But I was really concerned about her, and on the way home from the reunion, I talked to her. Even if she ignored me, I kept talking. Why did I do that? Because she was my first love. She was the prettiest in the class and was out of reach for me, and I couldn't confess my feelings and date her. Only the popular and outgoing guys in our circle would ever confess to her. I sealed away my feelings for her. Later, I dated another girl who had confessed to me. I feel sorry for what I did to her. Though I had feelings for someone else, I couldn't love her. Eventually, we broke up quickly. After that, I met various girls, but what always came to mind was the sparkling lily of my youth. I could never forget her. The reason I've remained single until now is something I've never told or consulted with anyone about. But I was sure when I saw her again. The reason I've been working so hard all these years is that deep down, I've been waiting for the day I could reunite with her. That's why I was so curious when I saw her. And even though she ignored me, I kept talking. Suddenly, I felt as if a great mystery had been solved, and I felt a clearing in my heart. It was a moment when I could look at my feelings that I hadn't wanted to see until now. I firmly grasped her crying shoulder and told her, even with the scars from the burns, your beauty hasn't disappeared. But she still looked worried, saying, but because of this, I lost my job, and my life is ruined. Just because you work hard doesn't guarantee a prosperous life. Look at me, still single at this age, and my parents are already worried about me dying alone. I smiled wryly, and she smiled too. Oh, already worrying about dying alone. No offense, but your parents seem a bit premature. Right? They're rushing things. Life's just beginning, I think. You can't get pessimistic and down now. When I said this, she smiled and said, I'm glad I talked to you. I feel a bit brighter now. Apparently, talking and laughing with someone was something she hadn't done in a while. Her smile was as beautiful and enchanting as it had been in high school. I said goodbye to her that day and went home. The next day and the day after, I worried about her and started visiting her apartment. I bought pastries and sandwiches, and awkwardly cooked stew and brought it to her in containers. Before I knew it, I was visiting her house often, watching her stuff her face with my cooking, exclaiming, delicious. One day, she thanked me again. I remember the serious look on your face, Daniel, when you talked to me after the reunion. I felt like I could confide in you about my scars since you seemed to really care about me. I was told that by her and my face turned red. I'm glad my seriousness got through to you. I said awkwardly. She smiles at me, saying, thank you for always caring about me. As the days went by and I met her more often, she naturally showed me a smile like the old days more and more. I can't help but feel embarrassed when I receive her smiles and sudden words of gratitude. I love and adore her, but when I gaze into her beautiful eyes, the embarrassing feelings of adolescence return, and my embarrassment wins. I felt that it would still take some time before I could move forward with dating her. But it's okay for us to go at our own pace. I secretly vowed to myself not to rush our relationship. 3 years have passed since then, and we are dating. We are in the process of talking about getting married. Hey, I want the ceremony to be like this. What do you think? She says, showing me a pamphlet of a wedding in San Francisco, featuring a woman in a traditional white wedding dress. Sounds great. I smile. She also smiles, saying, so, shall we decide on this? I want to continue watching her smile like that, forever by her side. I'm James Wilson, 27, an office worker. I decided to join a printing company as soon as I graduated from college. It's not that I joined the company because I had any hopes or dreams. It's just because they were the first company to offer me a job. While working at the printing company during the day, I started a side business using the camera I've always loved. Now I've become able to earn a bit from the photography I started learning on my own. I often find myself torn between striking out on my own as a photographer or sticking with the stable job. These days I'm really in a quandary. My work at the printing company is mostly just odd jobs. I've been reprimanded by my boss for seeming unmotivated, and it happens frequently. I knew I stood out at work. I've always stood out in groups. There's a simple reason for this. I've been a kind of mistrustful person since I was a child. Of course, I wasn't like that from the moment I was born. The cause of my mistrust in people comes from childhood trauma. My dad had started his own business, managing a well-known trading company in our local area. He was smart, kind, and bold. To me, my dad was a role model. Even as a child, I thought I would become like my dad and build up his company with him. I might have been precocious in that sense. But this dream was shattered in an instant. My dad suddenly passed away. He collapsed at work, and by the time he was taken to the hospital, he was unconscious. He passed away without ever waking up. I think I was 10 at the time. After my dad's death, my mom became like a zombie. She was always crying, unable to face reality. I think I stood beside her, gritting my teeth. And then, taking advantage of my mom's grief, my uncle took over my dad's business. It seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. He probably had been planning to take over the company all along and was just waiting for an opportunity. With sweet words to my mom, he managed to ingratiate himself and successfully take control of the company. After that, my mom and I were cast out, as if the ladder had been pulled out from under us. There was indeed an inheritance left by my dad. My mom must have received a substantial amount of insurance money. Regarding the takeover of the company, my mom had given up from the start. Your father left us with more than just the company, she told me, but I couldn't accept it. And so, becoming a bundle of distrust towards humanity, I became an outcast in both elementary and middle school. I think I managed to get by reasonably well during my high school life, learning to fit in to some extent, but during my adolescent years in middle school, I think I was truly an outsider in my class. It's not like I was bullied or anything. I think my classmates just didn't know what to do with me. With glaring eyes, my middle school classmates treated me like a heretic, unable to hide my distrust of humanity. It wasn't like that from the beginning. There was an atmosphere of wanting to get along like typical middle schoolers. It was only me who couldn't accept it. I kept putting up walls between my classmates and me. They must have felt that I was rejecting them. I had no intention of fitting into the class. Realizing this, they seemed to have decided to erase my existence. I began to be ignored by the entire class. The teacher must have noticed this. He must have turned a blind eye. I wanted friends, even though I distrusted people. I was bewildered, not knowing what to do with myself. I felt impatient with my out-of-place self. In such a class, there was a girl who, like me, was an unusual presence. Her name was Miranda White. Miranda, too, was treated as a non-person in the class. It's not that she had a quiet personality. If her opinion differed, she would express it in words, and she had a clear sense of self. What caught my eye first was her straight posture. It wasn't forced but natural and beautiful. I think her core was strong. Her skin was pale white, and her downcast, light brown eyes were hidden by long, rich lashes. Her face was well proportioned, but there was no cheerfulness. I liked to watch her somewhat melancholic profile. She seemed more mature than anyone else in the class. What made her situation slightly different from mine was that Miranda lived her daily life as a non-person among her classmates. In her eyes, no one was reflected. She avoided contact with anyone, and I honestly admired her for her pride. I think I was projecting the image of what I wanted to become onto her. I never asked her why she maintained such an attitude. We exchanged words maybe a few times, if at all. But I still can't forget Miranda. We went to different high schools, so the image of Miranda in my mind remains that of a middle school student. I still remember her well. Eventually, my work as a photographer began to gain recognition. Then a big job came my way. It was an offer from the photographer I was apprenticing under. The job was to accompany someone on a spiritual journey, capturing the experience of this ancient practice in photographs. At first, when I heard the term spiritual journey, I had no idea what it meant. I vaguely thought of something like a mystical figure. Of course, I accepted the offer readily. I didn't have the option to refuse an offer from the person I was apprenticing under. I immediately looked up spiritual journey in the library. It was a mix of mountain worship from ancient Japan and other elements, like Buddhism. It seems there are also elements of Taoism. Retreating to the mountains, undergoing harsh training, and achieving enlightenment. It's a unique Japanese religion and faith. When I think of the appearance of the practitioners, I can't help but connect it with mystical figures. Capturing the training in the rugged mountains would require considerable physical strength from me as well. As I researched the spiritual practice, I became excited. I have a strong curiosity. Capturing a world unknown to me with my camera. I was looking forward to it and couldn't help it. I applied for a vacation at the printing company I worked for. Since the company was solid with employee benefits, I wasn't criticized for taking a long vacation. So, I ended up spending time in the mountains, the object of faith, with several mountain practitioners. I had imagined them to be scarier, but to my relief, they were all strict yet kind-hearted people. They informed me of the taboos during their training, and I asked them to pretend I wasn't there so I could capture their natural states. It seemed I could photograph them more naturally that way. The term mountain hermit apparently means one who lies down in the mountains to train. It's strongly influenced by nature worship that has been present in Japan since ancient times. Some of them run through paths where no path exists at an unbelievable speed, making me feel as if I've encountered a real mythical creature. Surprisingly, some even have wives and children. I was truly astonished when I was told that they carry on with normal lives while training in various spiritual mountains all around Japan. They step away from the hustle and bustle of the city, enter the spiritual mountains, worship nature, and lie down in the mountains. They absorb the spiritual energy of the mountains and return to the city. Some people also spoke of how living such a life, far removed from daily routine, allows them to confront themselves. I found myself becoming more engrossed in this job than I had thought. Initially, I just wanted to take cool shots. But as I heard various stories, I decided to capture them as they truly were. The sight of them racing through the mountains was more vibrant and full of energy than any human I've seen in the city. I clung on desperately and frantically snapped away with my camera. The shooting period seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. When everything was over, I was left dumbfounded. What remained was the realization that my petty pride had narrowed my scope and vision. I feel I should tell my old self, who had shut himself away in a shell of mistrust, "It's okay, come on out." I felt that way from the bottom of my heart. I think the days I spent with the mountain hermits were a turning point that felt like the whole world had been turned upside down. As proof, I started actively doing things I had been avoiding. I began to accept invitations to go drinking with colleagues I always avoided, or to events hosted by my boss. I became a little more talkative at work, able to exchange opinions with my colleagues. I was stunned by the weight of the shackles I had placed on myself. I was even surprised to feel as if I could see farther away as I opened my heart. And right now, there's me, ready to take on a new challenge. I usually would throw it straight into the trash. But this time, it was an invitation to a middle school reunion. There have been 2 reunions so far, and I have missed both of them. I didn't even respond. Back in middle school, I must have been an eyesore to my classmates. I don't think anyone would want to see me. But this time, I gathered the courage and marked my attendance. By attending the reunion I've always avoided, I hope to see a whole new world, and this expectation fills my heart. And there's just a tiny bit of hope. I want to see Miranda White once again, the girl I used to admire back then. This small expectation and hope kept me excited until the day of the reunion. On the reunion day, when I told my name at the reception, the girl handling the registrations looked at me twice in surprise. She obviously didn't expect me to attend. I think she was one of those girls who followed the queen bee of our class, Samantha Smith. In our middle school class, there was a clear hierarchy. At the top was Samantha Smith. She had a slightly mature face and was pretty, but her personality was too strong for me. What was amazing about Samantha was that she was aware of her beauty and used it as a weapon. She controlled the entire class with it. Remembering how she manipulated her classmates and took satisfaction in it makes me sick. Samantha will probably be at the venue too. I've had a bad experience with her as well. She probably was in a bad mood that time. Our shoulders touched a little when we passed each other at the classroom entrance. Of course, it wasn't on purpose. She made a big fuss about it. The girls in the class all sided with Samantha. It was as if they were competing to see who could support her first. They were afraid that if they were too slow, they might become Samantha's next target. Everyone was afraid of Samantha. In the end, I was kicked out of the classroom by the girls and had to spend the day in the nurse's office. Even now, thinking back on it, it's an unpleasant memory. I really don't feel like eagerly meeting that person. But if I run away now, I'll just repeat the same mistake. Taking a deep breath, I entered the venue. The reunion venue was set up as a standing cocktail party, and nearly everyone had gathered. At a glance, I could see a few faces I vaguely remembered. I unconsciously looked for the figure of Miranda White. She probably wouldn't show her face in a place like this. As I expected, Miranda was nowhere to be seen in the venue. I can't believe it, you really showed up, huh? The voice addressing me, as I was observing the venue from the corner, was from Phil Johnson, a classmate. He was one of those who had been annoyed by me and had taken the lead in ignoring me. Could it be that growing up means Phil would initiate a conversation? Phil, you still have the look from our middle school days. I respond with ordinary words. I have no intention of taking Phil's childish bait. Apparently not pleased with my attitude, Phil continued to pester me. You've become capable of such a dull response, pretending to be a regular adult, but you're probably still an outsider at work, right? People like you are what they call social misfits, you know. Is he a little drunk? Phil's face was red. That's true. I'm kind of an outsider. I affirm Phil's words. It's not a lie. What's with that? Trying to act like a mature adult. My nonchalant brushing off of his sarcasm seems to irk him. Phil's voice starts to get louder and louder. What's going on? Gradually, people began to gather around Phil and me. I've gotten older, after all. So have you, Phil, right? You can always be a middle schooler. At my words, Phil's face turned red. He probably finally realized how embarrassing he was being. You know, James, you've really changed since becoming an adult. You were always good looking. Aren't you popular now? The crowd parted suddenly, and through the gap appeared Samantha Smith. It was exactly the same as in middle school. The only difference was the favorable attitude toward me. It hasn't changed, then or now. I've never been popular, not once in my life. I answer with a bitter smile, and Samantha's eyes light up. They were eyes trying to discern if I was sincere. I've always hated that look in Samantha's eyes. A look that probes others, evaluating them. I recall with disgust how Samantha's comments after such evaluation were directly connected to my standing in class. Well, that's something. Come over here, James. We have a lot to catch up on. At this moment, my place was at the side of Samantha, the queen bee. Phil glares at me with resentful eyes. It's well known in class that Phil has always had feelings for Samantha. I think Phil must be boiling with rage to see Samantha taken away by me, who used to be the butt of jokes. Samantha is aware of Phil's feelings. She's been toying with Phil's heart all along. Oh, by the way, you were dating Miranda in middle school, right? I saw you during graduation. Samantha doesn't suit you. You're better off with damaged goods like Miranda. I reflexively turned to Phil's insinuating words. Reacting too much was a mistake. Phil looks at me as I turn around and whistles. Huh, what did you see? Were you dating Miranda? Samantha turns to Phil with a surprised look. Phil starts talking triumphantly. On graduation day, I was planning to confess to Miranda. Miranda was normal even on the day of graduation. But she stood by the window, staring at the school gate long after the ceremony ended. We were set to go to different high schools. This was my only chance. Miranda. When I call her, Miranda slowly turned around. She probably realized that I was looking at her. On her pale skin, from her left eye down to her collarbone, there was a scar like a keloid, trailing straight down. I'd heard someone gossiping that it was a wound from a major accident. This scar was why Phil referred to Miranda as damaged goods. You know, after we graduate, I stutter, struggling to get the words out. Her straightforward gaze makes it difficult to say what I had planned since the night before. I just want to get her contact information. I begin to panic. Miranda then smiles gently. Don't be nervous around me, you weirdo. A voice filled with dignity and a hint of laughter. The words that Miranda spoke to me, I think it was the first time. We will go to different high schools, right? It's the last day today, huh? I don't know what to say to Miranda, who mutters with deep emotion. Suddenly, her body fluttered as if carried by the wind. With a light agility, she jumped beside me, standing in my arms. She reached up with both hands to press my shoulders and stretched herself upward. Her warm breath grazed my cheek. The next moment, something soft touched my cheek. In an instant, the sensation moved away, and her hands that had been on my shoulders were gone. Dodging, the moment I realized it was Miranda's lips, My face started to burn with embarrassment. What? I inadvertently sat down on the spot, my knees giving way. Watching me, Miranda chuckled. Her face was also slightly flushed. I thought I'd leave my mark, my first mark. Now you won't forget me, will you, James? With a triumphant look, she told me this before running out of the room like the wind. I was left alone, as if in a daydream. I touched my cheek with one hand, and it felt a little hot. This was a secret between Miranda and me. I had no idea at the time that someone had been peeking at our secret. Even if it was unavoidable that someone had seen us, I didn't want them to ruin my memories now. I glared at Phil. Phil looked at my changed complexion with satisfaction. Just when he was about to triumphantly reveal Miranda and my secret, the entrance door opened, and someone called James. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to the entrance. James, glad to find you. Miranda spotted me, and just like before, ran to me like the wind. My heart began to beat loudly at this sudden reunion. Thank you, James. I just wanted to tell you that. Ignoring the classmates surrounding me, Miranda deeply bows before me. What do you mean, huh? I inadvertently responded just like I did on graduation day. Where did the mature me from a moment ago go? That's how I felt. Surprised, Miranda hands me a book. It's the photo album I took. That photo album with the theme of ascetic mountain practices, something akin to a spiritual retreat. A photo album that shouldn't be in stores yet and should only be in the hands of those involved. How do you have this? There are so many things I don't understand, and my mind is in turmoil. Peering over Miranda's shoulder at the photo album, Samantha exclaims, "This is the photo album taken by Noah, isn't it? He photographs more than just models." I had no idea. Samantha's words draw a crowd of girls. They all love the photos taken by Noah. I'm starting to feel embarrassed being here. Noah is the name I use when working as a photographer. It's my other name that no one knows. Actually, this is my brother. James took these for me. Looking at this photo album, I finally understood my father and brother. It was James who broke the spell that had been binding me. Miranda embraces the photo album as if it were precious. Wait. Noah is James. Samantha's words send a murmur through the crowd. There's a bit of a reason for this. Noah's models always become superstars afterward. This is the superstition associated with me. Indeed, any unknown model I shoot takes off afterward. Their own hard work is part of it, of course. But now, having a photo taken by me is known as a shortcut to success. Are these hermits in the mountains your brothers? Ignoring Samantha's line, I asked Miranda. Miranda nodded sagely and enlightened me. The hermits are Miranda's half-brothers. She said that she doesn't share any blood with her father either. Her mother, who was a frail woman, married as a second wife and passed away shortly thereafter. Losing her mother, Miranda was left at home in grief, while her father and brothers went away to practice religious asceticism. Left alone at home, Miranda gradually closed off her heart. It was the same at school. She locked away herself that would inadvertently expected something from others. By not expecting anything from anyone, she probably avoided getting hurt. Even though she wanted to go with them, she couldn't, due to many sacred mountains being off-limits to women. What on earth were they doing, leaving her behind? Miranda was always suspicious. She always resisted her brothers and father, wondering if they really had to accomplish something so important that they would leave her feeling so lonely. My brothers showed me this photo album, and I saw the candid shot he took with you. I knew it was you, James, right away. Miranda looked at the earnest images I had taken of her brothers and finally understood them. Thank you for showing me the truth. She looked straight into my eyes as she said it. Even with makeup on, the scars on her face were not hidden. As I was about to speak to her, Samantha slid her body between Miranda and me. "James, take a picture of me. You know I'm modeling, right? As a favor to a classmate." Samantha said that with a flattering smile. Her queen-like attitude had vanished. "I know she is working as a model. Her reputation among the makeup artists was terrible. I don't shoot anything ugly, sorry." What instantly came out of my mouth was my true feelings, and Samantha's face turned bright red. She must have never been humiliated like this in public before. I could hear the giggling of the girls around us. Right now, the only one I want to photograph in this venue is Miranda in front of me. Samantha flew into a rage and raised her hand but seemed to restrain herself at the last moment. Apparently, she didn't want to make a further spectacle of herself. She turned on her heel and left the venue. I watched as Phil chased after her. "I don't want to be photographed, but show me what you'll shoot first." Miranda said that to me with a smile. "After all, my mark is still on your cheek, isn't it, James?" When Miranda said that, I inadvertently touched my cheek. It was getting a little hot, just like on graduation day. Later on, I would find myself in a terrible predicament. I was surrounded by the strong hermits and sitting solemnly in the center, on my knees. Surrounded by Miranda's brothers and father, I was being questioned. "Can you make our sister, our daughter, happy?" The intensity was even more serious, and during their training times. I spoke from the depths of my heart. "I will make her happy. Please give Miranda to me." With a determination that wouldn't break, I spoke, and voices of approval rang out. "Well said." I was relieved. It seemed I had somehow been accepted. "What? Wait. Actually, no." Suddenly, Miranda raised her voice. Everyone present turned to her with bewildered expressions. Where did the results of this hour-long discussion go? "Just wait. Just a little bit longer. I want to be a part of this family a bit more." Looking at the men surrounding me, Miranda finally realized how much she was cherished by her family. "I want to be a sister to my brothers a little longer, a daughter to my father. Is that wrong? Just a little bit longer. Please let me stay." With puppy dog eyes, she said that it was impossible to refuse. "You're impossible. When you're satisfied, become a part of my family." I answered with a wry smile. The next moment, the men started lifting me up in the air in the low-ceilinged living room. Me, flying in the air. Coming for a marriage proposal and ending up being hoisted in the air. But looking at the happy tears flowing from the faces of the men, I felt my choice wasn't wrong at all. And no matter how long it takes, it's okay. Because Miranda's mark is on my cheek. How did you like that? Subscribing to the channel will be a great encouragement for our production. See you in the next video. My name is Oliver Davis. I'll be 36 years old this year. Honestly, it's a good age, but I'm still single. I've dated women before, but due to my shyness, I couldn't quite take action, and I'm also busy with work, with no opportunities to meet anyone since I'm constantly going back and forth between home and the office. Perhaps this is just an excuse for being single. I work at the headquarters of a large supermarket in the city, working as a full-time employee in the product department. I grew up in the deep countryside, but I was drawn to the city and came out. I was raised in a corn farming family that has been passed down for generations. Even as a child, I was often asked to help out during harvest time. When I was young, it felt like playing house, and it was fun to imitate my father and mother. But as I entered my rebellious phase as a junior high school student, I began to resent spending my time helping out. There are small convenience stores and candy stores, but they are not within my cycling distance. There are no places to play, and it's impossible for children to go to large commercial facilities. I want to get out of this countryside soon. That's what I thought as I spent my junior and senior high school years. I longed for the city I saw in dramas and became even more attracted to it when I went to New York with my friends for the first time in high school. I didn't tell my parents, but I worked very hard in my studies, thinking that I would go to a university in New York after graduating from high school. When it was time to decide on my future path, I told my parents for the first time that I was going to go out of the state. I'm going to take the entrance exam for a university in New York. If I pass, I'll be leaving home, so please support me. I needed money for tuition and rent in New York. I planned to work part-time there, but I would have to rely on my parents for the initial expenses, so I asked them politely. But my father yelled at me, saying, "A university in New York, you're planning to leave home. You're the eldest son of this house. Don't you have any awareness of being the heir?" I thought he may be a little upset, but deep down, I had a faint hope that he would support me. I don't approve it. What's this about a university in New York? It's only natural for the son of a farmer to continue the family business. I couldn't help but argue back to my father, who was so dismissive. Sure, you may have been the eldest son of a farmer and lived that way, but I have my own life. You should let me decide for myself. Don't you realize how hard I've studied? In the middle of saying that, my father said, "Shut up. I won't approve it. Cool your head," and retreated to his room. I didn't exchange words with my father after that, but my mother listened to my feelings. She wanted me to take over the family business in her heart, but she said, "Oliver has a good head on his shoulders. Go and challenge yourself to make use of it." And she allowed me to take the university entrance exam. I passed the exam in one try. On the day I left for New York, my father went to work early in the morning, and I didn't see his face. "Don't worry about your father. Take care and go." My kind mother said that and saw me off. I had trouble getting used to the crowds and heavy traffic in my first urban life, but I spent fulfilling days living the life I had longed for. I worked part-time to avoid putting too much burden on my parents for living expenses. Of course, I took my college studies seriously. During my studies in that department, I became interested in the retail business, and after graduating from college, I got a job at a large supermarket. I thought I would be assigned to my desired department right after the new employee training, but it turned out that I had to gain on-site experience first because the department I was aiming for was in the headquarters. The site meant working in the store. When I was new, I was made to do everything from serving customers at the cash register, restocking merchandise, and assisting the merchandise manager. In my second year, I was put in charge of the general merchandise department, where I handled creating the sales floor, selling, ordering, etc. After that, I was allowed to experience various departments, such as the food department and the confectionery department, by moving to different stores. 10 years after joining the company, with retirements and generational changes, I was promoted to the product department at the headquarters and realized my desired department transfer. In the product department at the headquarters, I gained experience with buyers. I was assigned as an assistant for various buyers for about 2 months, and then I was officially assigned as the person in charge of the confectionery department. I did everything from meetings with manufacturers, creating layouts for sales floors that changed seasonally, choosing special sale or daily sale products, to setting prices, and supporting stores with staffing. There was a considerable amount of work as I had imagined. I was working as if being chased every day. I was learning while assisting the buyer, and I was able to coordinate well with the buyer, so I think my work was going smoothly. But 6 months ago, there was a personnel change among the buyers, and my direct buyer was replaced. The new buyer was Amelia, who had been in charge of the food department for a long time. I thought she was a strict person when I was dealing with her as a general worker at the headquarters, but as a direct superior, she was very strict and spoke in a rough tone. Amelia, the buyer who had been working in the food department for many years, probably had the toughest job, as it occupies most of the store's selling space. I think the headquarters has mostly male employees, but she has been working hard as a female buyer, so you need to be quite strong to keep up. I think I'm good with people, though I hate to say it myself. However, she seems to dislike my gentle way of speaking and personality. What was that phone call earlier? Just convey the message and finish it, right? I still have things to do. That's why I hate country folks. Once she found out that I grew up in the countryside, she started calling me a country bumpkin every chance she got. Perhaps she thinks country folks equal slow-witted, as I've never been scolded for my working speed before, but now I am even yelled at with, "Are you still doing that?" The other buyers who were watching encouraged me by saying, "Don't worry about it too much, just do your job, Oliver." There were challenging aspects, but I pushed forward without worrying about them. One day, we had a negotiation with a confectionery manufacturer. I was going to head there with Amelia, the buyer. After some light chit-chat in the negotiation room, the negotiation began. "Oliver, get the documents." It was just as I was told by Amelia, the buyer, and I was taking them out of my bag. That's when I slipped, scattering the documents all over the floor. "Oh, I'm sorry." I hurriedly gathered the materials, but Amelia yelled, "What are you doing?" in her usual shouting tone, even though we were at the manufacturer's office. She didn't help me gather the materials, but apologized to the person in charge, sighing and saying, "Sorry, really, he's a country bumpkin, so he's stupid." "You have met Oliver several times, haven't you? Was he this dull before I was assigned to him?" It's been more than 10 years since he came out from the countryside, but a countryman who lived deep in the mountains always smells like a potato. After all, it is best for city people to work with other city people, isn't it? While I was organizing the materials, buyer Amelia was saying that to the person in charge. I made the atmosphere awkward, but that day's negotiation went well, and we returned to the headquarters. However, the next day, we received a message addressed to Amelia from the manufacturer we negotiated with yesterday, saying we want to stop the transaction. Amelia was also in a panic at the unexpected situation. Apparently, the incident during yesterday's negotiation was the problem. I was told that the president of the manufacturer had seen and heard the conversation when I was organizing the documents that had fallen on the floor. Come to think of it, at that time, one of the manufacturer's representatives had left his seat to bring a laptop. The door to the negotiation room was open at that time. That's why Amelia's sarcastic remarks seemed to have leaked outside the room. After that negotiation, the 3 representatives were called to the president's office, and the president was openly angry, saying, "What was that buyer doing? It's outrageous to make fun of a person just because he is from countryside." The reason was that the president's family home was a farm, and he often said, "It's the candy because of the material maker." Also, the president is from the countryside, so it was reasonable for him to be angry. After that, our president apologized, but the manufacturer's president was not listening, saying, "If you want to work with city people in the city, go ahead. We will stop dealing with you." Somehow, we managed to convey our apologies to the fullest extent, and we avoided a complete stop of all transactions. But the transaction was reduced to 1/3 of what it had been before. Since we had been taken care of by that manufacturer for a long time and they had occupied most of the sales floor, it was a significant blow to our company. Amelia, who was held responsible, was running around, bowing her head to other confectionery companies, negotiating to increase the number of transactions, and was chased to fill the gap in the store. I ended up taking on other tasks in place of Amelia, but whether I was sickened by the daily bowing, buyer Amelia lashed out at me, saying, "I had a terrible experience because of you. Be prepared when things are settled." However, our president and other employees blame Amelia, not me. Amelia, who felt humiliated, began to increase my workload in retaliation, and the contents of her sarcasm became quite terrible when no one else was around. I had a stomachache every day. I managed to endure it, but I was suddenly hit by a severe dizziness and sat down in the corridor of the headquarters. My vision kept spinning around, and I was so dizzy that I couldn't stand up and walk. A colleague called an ambulance for me, as I looked pale and felt nauseous. As a result of the examination, it was Meniere's disease. I was hospitalized for 1 day while receiving an IV drip. I was able to get some medication and go home, but the doctor told me that stress was the cause, so I needed to rest properly. Seeing my downcast face, the doctor seemed to sense something, wrote me a note, and kindly urged me, "You can take time off with this. Please rest well." So, I decided to take a month off work. I was experiencing severe dizziness and felt unsteady even when going to the bathroom. I realized that living alone would be tough, so I called my mother for the first time in several months. Then, I was told that my younger brother, Tom, would come to pick me up. I decided to rest at my parents' home. On the way home, in the car, I said, "I'm sorry for making you come get me." This was the first thing that came to my mouth, something I felt I had to say. I had said the same thing when he came to get my luggage. In response, Tom said, "Well, if you can sleep, just sleep. I'll wake you up when we get home." It seemed like he was letting me know that I didn't have to force a conversation. When we arrived at my parents' home in Nebraska, my mother was waiting at the entrance, looking worried. "Welcome home. I've laid out the bed for you. Just rest." She gently stroked my staggering back and accompanied me to the room with Tom. While preparing to lie down in the room, my father came in, looking a bit restless. "Take your time. Don't worry about just a month. Make sure to get well before you go back." Despite his blunt words, I could tell from his expression that he was very concerned. "Sorry, and thank you." My parents nodded, and my mother said, "We'll take care of your brother. I'll go prepare dinner," and they both headed to the living room. Tom helped me change clothes and packed my bags, working silently, while the room filled with a quiet tension. Tom had come to pick me up with just one phone call, but like my father, I hadn't been in touch with him since I moved to New York. My mother called me every few months or so, and we would talk and hear about what was going on. But I had left home against my father's wishes after arguing with him about taking over the family business. I had put Tom in this situation. So, I think that's why I felt guilty. Lying on the bed and looking up at my younger brother, I finally found my voice. "I'm sorry, Tom. It's too late, but I did something terrible to you, and I'm ashamed to be coming back like this." These were the words I had wanted to say so many times, even trying to say them in the car. Then, Tom became slightly amused and chuckled. "Haha, what are you talking about? You mean when you left home?" "Sure, I also had pressure to take over from Dad when it came to choosing my path. But thanks to your precedent, I was allowed to go to culinary school. Well, I did end up taking over the farm. But you know I'm running a small pastry cafe as well, right? I'm doing what I love, so I don't think anything of it." That's what he said. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Really?" Then Tom, smiling shyly, said, "Anyway, just rest. I'll bring you something to drink. Just wait." Indulging in my family's kindness, I rested slowly. 3 weeks later, the dizziness had subsided, and I had enough energy to stroll around the house. I used to play in this little creek all the time when I was a kid. Listening to the babbling of the river, I took a deep breath and absorbed nature into my body. The city is nice, but it doesn't compare to nature. I had even started to feel relaxed enough to say that. In my adolescence, I found the countryside boring. But after experiencing life in the city, everything looked fresh, and I realized how wonderful an environment I had grown up in. There were so many realizations. Thinking it was about time to head home, I noticed a woman standing alone on the road. That's unusual. Hiking alone. I was still at a distance from her, but watching her, I noticed she was slightly dragging her foot. "Are you okay? Did you hurt your foot?" I caught up with the woman and called out to her. "Oh, actually, the sole of my shoe came loose," she said, with a distressed expression. It seems she had been walking with her shoe flapping for quite a while, planning to catch a bus to her destination. But with only one bus every 2 hours, she had no choice but to continue walking like that. In doing so, she ended up with a blister. Then the woman showed me a pamphlet and said, "I was trying to get to this place called the Forest Cafe, but my feet were already hurting. I wanted to give up and go home, but my phone ran out of charge and I couldn't call anyone." The place she was aiming for was Tom's Cafe. "This is my family's place. Shall we go together?" Though it was just a blister, she was injured, so I carried her on my back to my family's home. Both my mom and brother were surprised at what had happened, but seemed relieved to hear she was a guest. We took care of her injury and gave her some tea and cookies. "Delicious, and thank you for cleaning my wound, and I apologize for the piggyback ride earlier." She was either smiling because of the delicious taste or blushing with embarrassment from the piggyback ride. Her cheeks flushed as she giggled. Honestly, I was the one who felt embarrassed. I hadn't noticed when I first spoke to her, as she was wearing her hat low, but she was quite a beauty, which made me a bit giddy. Both my mom and my brother Tom were happily talking to her. Her name was Mia, and it seems she works in New York, just like me. She goes hiking or visits spas in the countryside a few times a year to refresh. Oh, it's already dusk. It gets dark quickly around here. You're welcome to stay the night if you'd like, Mom offered, and though Mia hesitated, she sensed my mom's genuine concern and decided to stay. After dinner, as I was the last to get out of the bath, I found Mia still watching TV in the living room. Would you like to have a drink together? So we drank together. It had been a while since I drank with someone, and this was the first time with someone as beautiful as her. Maybe I drank too fast, but I got quite drunk. Before I knew it, I was babbling about not having a wife or even a girlfriend at this age, while I was resting at my family's place and complaining about Amelia. Then Mia said, "As a thank you for helping me, I'll give you something special when we return to New York. Please look forward to it," she said, with a mischievous expression on her cute face. I must admit that it made my heart skip a beat, but that's between us. The night wore on, and we each went to sleep in our rooms. When I woke up the next morning, it was almost noon. I had slept deeply because of the heavy drinking. Mia had left early in the morning, thanking my parents before returning to New York. That was fun. I couldn't get her out of my mind for a while. Then, 3 days passed, and just as I was feeling down about returning to work, I got a call on my phone from the department manager. When I answered, he seemed flustered. "Did you do something while you were off? Anyway, come to work as soon as you can." The department manager hung up after saying only that. Reluctantly, I took the night flight back to New York and arrived at the office around noon the next day, as instructed. I was surprised by the warm welcome, but the reason was that the manufacturer we had reduced our dealings with had contacted us to continue trading as before. However, the condition was that I handle it. My mind, still in rest mode, couldn't catch up. Anyway, the next day, I was to visit the manufacturer. "Excuse me." As I opened the door to the meeting room, the woman in the center immediately said, "Oliver, hello, I'm the Vice President, Davis." No way. I couldn't help but shout. The woman was Mia, whom I had met at my family's home, and she was apparently the president's daughter of this manufacturer. I hadn't noticed since I had only heard her first name at that time. Usually, she doesn't participate in negotiations, but she would this time. Even the department manager accompanying me was astounded. The negotiation began in a friendly atmosphere. Not only the matter of reviving the cut product, but also the delivery of a large quantity of new products. "Remember when I said I'd give you something special? These new sweets are what I've been working on." Mia happily showed me the new products, but it was too soon to be surprised or delighted. They proposed to prioritize delivery of the new product and stock it heavily on the shelves, aiming for a further increase in sales. Our company has become the first to sell it, more than any other store, and that new product was heavily stocked with the launch of the new commercial. If you go to that store, you can buy it. The information spread instantly through customers' social media posts. In fact, popular celebrities appear in commercials for this new product. With limited edition merchandise included with the candy, there was a huge rush of customers to our stores. As a result, confectionery department sales were at an all-time high. I was thanked not only by the product manager but directly by the CEO. After that, it was decided that this achievement should be properly evaluated, and I was promoted to a confectionery buyer. As for Amelia, she was, needless to say, demoted. She was transferred to another department and started working as an assistant. Since then, this was the trigger for building a good relationship with Mia's company as a client. "I'm thinking of visiting your family again. Why don't you come with me and show your family how you're doing?" I had no reason to refuse her invitation like that, and now Mia and I are going back to my hometown. How did you like it? Subscribing to our channel will motivate us to produce more content. See you in the next video.